Um, this is a book review of the Anti-Death League by... Fuck. Okay. This is a book interview about the book The Anti-Death League, written by Kingsley Amis. And I'll start by making a short summary of the book. Now, the book mainly follows 10 characters. The story starts with these characters and ends with them. Now, all these characters are essential to the story and are mentioned, talked about, and occurs in conversation equally within the first pages. From start to finish, what drives these characters to evolve as characters in the book is the common plot of what is known as Mission Apollo, which is basically why they're at this In the middle of the book, the characters are confronted with posters calling for a meeting to talk about what is known as the Anti-Death League. Now, this outer conflict raises inner conflicts and certain reactions from the mentioned characters, because it raises the questions and speculations regarding death. Now, these inner conflicts include turning insane, catching a depression, and love affairs. So those two factors, the Anti-Death League and the Mission Apollo, is what arises conflicts in the characters, or what drives the characters forward in the story. Now, point of view. The point of view is really normal and basic in this story. It's a third person omniscient narrator. And we know this because we see, or we hear about all the characters' feelings, what they do, and because of this, it also enables us to trust exactly what the narrator tells us, because we have no reason to doubt him. It's not a subjective opinion or subjective information that he brings. Now, the composition of this book, it's divided into 3 parts, and it all occurs chronologically. 3 chapters, which makes it easier to split up the characters' developments. Like introductions is all in the first part, and in the middle, a bunch of stuff happens that's interesting, or conflicts arise, and in the third part is where everything just sort of falls into place, and characters get better, or Now, the language in this book is really, really rich. They use a lot of advanced words. Some of them I even had to look up. But even though they have this sort of professional language, besides, of course, the very variable language they use, in speech, they not only use these fancy words, but they also use like common person-to-person dialogue. Now, the environment and time we're in. We are in the middle of pre-Second World War, because in the story we are told that in the story we're told that this new weapon there might be might cause a Second World War. So we're in between the First and the Second World War. It takes place at an army base located in the Great Britain or England. And because of the time it's set in, obviously there's going to be used different types of language in the dialogue. Now, translation. Now, I'm going to choose to talk about, there's so many people and they're all really important, but I'm going to choose basically my two favorite people or characters in the story who are connected. Now, the first one is Lieutenant James Churchill. Now, Lieutenant James Churchill is among the youngest of the soldiers located in this army base, and he falls in love with Catherine Casement, which is the second person I will talk about. Now, James Churchill, the conflict that arises inside of him is basically the speculations about death. Now what breaks him is because, well, first of all, Catherine, the girl he's in love with, and they're having a relationship, she gets cancer, and while she's at the hospital, he's lying in her bed, obviously left to himself, with his mind wandering in all sorts of thoughts. And because of this Mission Apollo, he has been told that he basically has to murder a lot of people in a torturing sort of way. And because of this, he gets a depression. Now, the way that he escapes this depression is because Lucy has been told by a higher ranking officer that what Mission Apollo is really about is basically fooling the Chinese or Russians by giving spies false information and scaring them. That's basically Mission Apollo. And because of this, because of her help, he, in part 3, gets out of this depression. Now, Lucy, as well, is also introduced early in the story, and she had been admitted to the psychiatric part of the army base with Dr. Best. And she's important because she helps with the development of James Churchill, but her in herself is also really interesting. Now, what I think is so interesting between these two characters is basically the development in the story, how it's like totally opposite. Now, Catherine starts out, being really sad and depressed, and then in the middle in part 2, the middle of the story, the romance and love between Catherine and James, blossoms. And in part 3, Lucy is the strong character that helps get James out of his depression. However, on the other side, in the start, James Churchill is the strong person that helps Catherine out of her problems. And in the middle, of course, love blossoms, so on, so on. And then, as said, he's the one who becomes weak and gets a depression and then needs help. And that's really interesting, the connection that these two have. Now, the theme. Obviously, I could have chosen to talk about a theme like the love between these two. I mean, that's would be ideal, since I talked about them in the characterizations. However, I want to focus on the theme that I think covers the whole book. And I think that theme is basically slice of life. The slice of life at an army base between World War One and World War Two. Why do I think this? Well, because the book doesn't have a main story. There is no one or two main characters that drive the story, whom we follow. No, there isn't. Instead, we have 10 characters, 10 main characters, whom we follow, and we don't follow them all at the same time, obviously. There are these time-space skips in the story, which are shown by a little star like that. And basically when that happens, we swap between the characters. Like one moment we might talk about Miss Lucy and James Churchill, and then we swap over to Captain Leonard and his job catching spies. I think that's it for my review. Officially, you're not obliged or needed to watch anymore, but if you want to hear my personal thoughts about the book, you're welcome to stay tuned. This book is so interesting. It's so intelligently written that it has just been so hard to make this review. I really think it's just brilliant. The way the story leads you on thinking something's gonna happen, but then giant plot twist. I mean, you think Dr. Best, he's, just a helping doctor, but suddenly we find out that he might be obsessed with lesbianism, declaring people homosexuals. We find out that suddenly he's confronted and accused of being an enemy spy, and then we think he's an enemy spy, but then suddenly he's not, and he breaks and he goes crazy, and he wants to put James Churchill in a mental institute for whatever reason. And then out of nowhere, a person that we had heard nothing of nearly suddenly just is the spy. I mean, just Mission Apollo in itself, giant plot twist. But it's not just the action that I found so interesting. It's the language they use as well. I mean, really. It's brilliant. The language is just like so psychological as well. I mean, the whole story is just so psychologically, psychology has been implemented so geniusly. All from the words, to the action, to the way that we can relate to the characters. I mean, the author, at one moment, you would have two pages of dialogue, and then all of a sudden, there's like this much dialogue, and then a giant description, or just a dialogue between two people that just fills an entire page with one person talking. And they talk about genius things, problems that we can all relate to, problems about love, about work, about stress. You know? I mean, let me read you something up. I mean, you might not look at it the same way I do, but even just this, I think, is terrific. Now, I can't even, yeah, that's it. Have a good evening.